Hi, welcome back. This is Chapter 11, Micro Lecture PowerPoint number 3 on muscular tissue. This one's going to be important because for the muscular tissue chapter, it's how does the muscle fibers contract? How are they designed in a way where one can contract and the one right next to it contracts at the same time? And what are all these definitions that are involved in it? So this one is going to talk about, or this lecture is going to go into, what are all these definitions we need to know for this chapter 11. Let's get started. So threshold, latent period, and twitch. The best way to kind of look at this visually is through this chart. Although it doesn't really, show you everything you need to know, this side of the graph right here is going to be muscle tension. So when it starts to contract, it's going to become more tense, and this is going to be over time. So if you're looking here, there's the time of stimulation, and then there's a latent period. The latent period is just where nothing happens, and then it's going to contract and then relax. So let's go over all of these different parts that are involved in stimulating it, making it contract, and then making it relax. So a weak subthreshold electrical stimulus causes no contraction. You probably already know that because we've talked about it has to reach threshold. If it's below threshold or subthreshold, nothing's going to happen. Threshold is going to be that minimum voltage necessary to generate an action potential in the muscle fiber. So it needs to get at least to threshold, and it can go higher than threshold, but it needs to get at least to threshold before you can have a muscle contraction. And then that's going to produce a twitch, which is a quick cycle of contraction when the stimulus is at the threshold or higher. Then you have a latent period. So it's around 2 milliseconds for most muscle fibers. And that's going to be a delay between the onset of the stimulus and the onset of the twitch response. And this is the time required for excitation coupling, or contraction coupling, and tensing of electroelastic components of the muscles. This is all going to be the things happening down the T-tubule, the sarcoplasmic reticulum releasing calcium, the calcium going on the troponin, tropomyosin, the actin active sites that cross bridges. All of that is happening in that latent period. So even though you just hear latent period, now you kind of know what is all happening during that one period before, where it looks like nothing's happening. But a lot of things, and the things that confuse most students, happens during the latent period. Then it contracts during the contraction phase. And this is where the filaments slide and the muscle shortens. And once elastic components are taut, the muscle begins to produce external tension in the muscle that moves the load. So that's going to be the shortening of the muscle fibers and then moving whatever you're moving with that muscle. And it's a short-lived phase because it's very, very quick. It can only shorten so much. Then it's going to relax. And this is going to be the sarcoplasmic reticulum is quickly going to reabsorb calcium. The myosin releases the thin filaments and the tension declines. And the muscle returns to the resting length. The entire twitch lasts from 7 to 100 milliseconds. And if you kind of think about this, as long as you have calcium, and calcium is removing it from the actin active site, you can have very long muscle contractions, which would last around 100 milliseconds. The short ones are going to be mostly going to be for fine movements, are going to be close to 7 milliseconds. So what happens if something's the subthreshold or just below threshold? Nothing. Nothing happens at all. So at threshold intensity and above, that's when a twitch is going to be produced. And a twitch caused by increased voltage are not stronger than those at threshold. So I'll show you this in another. I'll show you this at another slide. So let's kind of look. You have some of these little signals are subthreshold. So if you look at it, if it's right above at threshold, you can see how it only innervates a couple of muscle fibers. But after a while, even if you have very, very, very strong stimulus, the muscle contraction remains about the same. because once you stimulate all the muscle fibers, there's no more muscle fibers to contract, so there's no way you can get a stronger contraction. You might want to lift the car off of your child, but because you don't have any muscle fibers available, you're not going to be able to move that car or move that bus or whatever you're thinking about in your head. You're not going to be able to do it because all the muscle fibers are going to be activated, and that's what is going to determine how strong that muscle contraction is. So to explain this with words, stimulating a nerve with higher and higher voltages produces stronger contractions, as you can see here. Higher voltages excite more and more nerve fibers in a motor nerve, which stimulates more and more motor units to contract. So you can see none here, none there because it's subthreshold. Right at threshold just does 1, does 2, does 4, and then does almost all of them. And eventually, when it's way up here, it's going to recruit every single motor unit or every single fiber of muscle fibers. Recruitment, or multiple motor unit stimulation, this is the process of bringing more and more units into play. So if you want a stronger response, you have to recruit more muscle fibers or motor units to fire at the same time. There's more. And then you can have contraction strength of twitches. So you can have a twitch that the stimulus is going to happen every few milliseconds, or it can be a trep. So let's look at these two phenomenons. When stimulus intensity voltage remains constant, twitch strength may vary with the stimulus frequency. So there's a muscle twitch, muscle twitch, muscle twitch, muscle twitch, and up to 10 stimuli per second. And each stimulus produces identical twitches and full recovery between twitches. So this is when your muscle fiber almost seems to be shaking at a certain frequency. But a trep is when the frequency is so quick that it starts to build upon each other. This is more of a violent shaking. And then the contraction strength of twitches. So 10 to 20 stimuli per second produces a trep. So when you have more within that area, it's going to be a staircase phenomenon. The muscle still recovers fully between the twitches, but each twitch develops more tension than the one before. This is when you start violently starting to shake. The stimuli arrive so rapidly that the sarcoplasmic reticulum does not have time between stimuli to completely reabsorb all the calcium in it. So that means the calcium becomes higher and higher and higher in the cytosol or within the cell, and then this will produce higher with each stimulus, causing subsequent twitches to be stronger. And then the heat release between each twitch causes muscle enzymes such as myosin ATPase to work more efficiently and produce stronger twitches as the muscle warms up. So this is going to be the trep is going to be that staircase phenomenon. We also have a couple more. You can have tetanus and incomplete tetanus, or tetanius. And this is when you have 20 to 30 stimuli per second. So this is so quickly that it produces incomplete tetanus. Each new stimuli arrives before the previous twitch is over, and each twitch piggybacks on the previous one, generating higher tension. Temporal summation results in two stimuli arriving close together. So because you have two coming at the same time, it starts doing this, and eventually you can see here that you'll reach a point where it's going to be completely contracted, but it hasn't reached it yet. That's going to be incomplete. This one, the wave summation, results from one wave of contraction adding onto another, and each twitch reaches a higher level of tension than the one before. The muscle relaxation only partially between the stimuli. That calcium is still going to be in the cytosol, so it's going to be coming so quickly that your muscle cannot contract, and produces a state of sustained fluttering contraction called incomplete tetanus. Now, complete is when it's coming very, very, very quickly. So when you have the stimuli coming so quickly, the muscle has zero time to relax between stimulus. The twitch fuses a smooth, prolonged contraction called complete tetanus. A muscle in complete tetanius produces about 4 times the tension as a single twitch. This rarely occurs in the body, which rarely exceeds 25 stimuli per second, normally. Sometimes the smoothness of the muscle contraction is because motor units functions asynchronously, and this is when one muscle unit relaxes, another contracts and takes over so the muscle does not lose tension. But if you have multiple motor units coming in, this is when you can have that prolonged tension. Also in some exercises like in Pilates or some types of stretching and stuff, where you can reach all of those muscle signals coming in at the same time, and produces that sustained twitch or sustained contraction. You can also have isometric and isotonic contraction. Isometric muscle contraction, the muscle producing internal tension while an external resistance causes it to stay the same length or become longer. This is going to be when you're holding a weight, an isometric, where you have a weight, it's keeping its length, but there is going to be tension on it. And it's important in postural muscular function and the antagonistic muscle joint stabilization. So stabilization, where when you're just standing straight, you're not really moving, but you're keeping your muscle tone. That's isometric. Isotonic, on the other hand, this is where you're going to have movement, which there's going to be weight on that movement that's going to cause this to shorten, but it's going to make it stronger at the same time. So let's take a look at it. An isotonic muscle contraction, the muscle changes in length with no change in tension. The concentric contraction, muscle shortens as it maintains tension. The eccentric contraction, muscle lengthens as it maintains tension. This is when you're moving the weight up and then moving it back down. And that concludes micro lecture number 3 on muscle fibers. Good luck.